Is for today, everything's okay, everything's okay. Never comes again, another day like yesterday. Is for today, everything's okay, everything's okay.
Good morning, everybody. I started this podcast yesterday twice, and either I was very, very nonverbal, tired, I don't know what it was, but I was not able to follow through. So I'm going to take another run at it today. And let's start with, this podcast is called JS Wonders, and that's because my brain has a particular function wherein constantly in the background, it's just like taking information, conversations, experiences, news articles, whatever, and it just sits there and runs it in the background. And it thinks about it, and it compares it to other things, it analyzes it, and it has opinions about it, and it cooks it and cooks it and runs it and runs it. And that can be really annoying, and I've had to learn how to cope with the fact that my brain is restless. But also there are these benefits that it'll do that in the background. Sometimes I'm not even really aware that I'm just thinking through stuff, thinking through. But what'll happen is all of a sudden one day something will raise up into consciousness and hit me, and I'll be like, oh, that's how that works. And it will be because my brain got enough data points and enough information to realize how something fits together, and it'll just go plop, and there it is. So I had one of those experiences 2 or 3 days ago, and I wrote some notes, so you'll see me looking at the notes. But this was in reference to narcissistic personality disorder and the idea of a narcissist. Now, there are definitely people who are pretty toxic, who are extremely narcissistic. That does exist. The personality disorder, when you see it, there's a lot of people out there pathologizing one another, insulting one another. Every time they get their feelings hurt, they insist that the other person is a narcissist. But when you meet someone who has narcissistic personality disorder, their behavior is extreme. The way they relate to their family members and their kids is extreme. And it's really, really obvious. Although if you don't know them well, you're never going to see it because a narcissist is busy presenting a very warm, kind, very human front because they know that that's what plays well. But so there's a ton of information out there. There's a ton of people accusing one another of being a narcissist. And one thing that really bothered me about the conversation is, as a therapist, I attempt to understand. It doesn't mean I forgive. I'm not okay with people who abuse children. I'm not okay with pedophiles. But just professionally, clinically, at some level, I want to understand. And I want to be able to have a reasonable description or understanding of what a thing is, how it works. I had a client once who shared with me a saying, I forget where it's from, but it's something like, nothing human is foreign to me. And it's a way of being of radical understanding and a radical openness, that it's like the human experience, why be shocked about any of it? Yes, feel disturbed that horrible things happen. Yes, there are horrible things that happen, but why be shocked? These things have been happening ever since the beginning. I remember in class, someone got offended with me when I was in my graduate program, and we were talking about psychopaths. And I posited that I thought that maybe psychopaths were natural, meaning it may not necessarily be just someone who we see as sick and twisted, but that psychopaths have an important social function. And in the past, we just actually even aggrandized them. You think about what a male was expected to do 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years. It's like you could be a farmer, a business person, or a soldier was a way that you could support your family. And what people did in war was horrific. It was just normal that a conquering army would enter an area and murder all the men and murder all the young men, maybe down to 12 years of age, 11, and rape the women and slaughter and then bring slaves back. And that was normal. And that man had to be able to do that, spend 2 or 3 years doing that, and then go back to his family and hug his child. And there's a psychopathy in there, right? There's an ability to see other people as an object. Anyway, so I really offended one of my classmates who was like, "That's not true." Yeah, I don't know whether it is or not, but again, that kind of offense, pardon me, is what I seek to avoid in myself. Not that I want things to those things happen and I want to do something about them, but that I think we do ourselves a disservice when we're always outraged and offended by something. And then psychology becomes this place where we put all this stuff because this behavior offends me. Oh, that person's sick. They have this mental health issue. They have this diagnosis. Like, society has gotten a little bit of information, has normalized a little bit of information about psychology, the DSM, and mental health challenges or mental health diagnoses. And suddenly everybody has bipolar, or everybody's a narcissist, or everybody has OCD. And I'm not saying this dismissively, that there aren't large numbers of people who struggle with some portion of those experiences. But my point is that in a backhanded way, it becomes this sort of childish, irresponsible way that we entitle ourselves to be shocked and outraged, and to feel punitive, and to feel that we have a right to punish those people, when really it's just retaliation. We're just retaliating because this person makes us very uncomfortable. Someone can be a narcissist and kind of be a bad person and not deserve punishment. They certainly deserve the consequences of lacking empathy and not being kind and being manipulative. And they do receive those consequences, but that doesn't mean that we have a right as a society to be, those are horrible, shitty, evil people, and we should do this or that, and let's all take them out and drown them in the ocean, like whatever. Like, people get way out of whack. And it's essentially because we allow ourselves to be infantile. We're emotionally outraged. And that doesn't help anybody. That doesn't protect any victims. There is no victim who's ever been protected by my moral outrage, my emotional outrage, or anybody else's. It's not until you understand a thing and learn how to interact with it and reduce the damage and reduce the behavior and stop people from behaving in a certain way that you actually help people. So anyway, that's my preamble, or the sort of context for this realization that I had. Narcissists are so vilified, and I've been abused quite badly by narcissists, and I have an instinctive trauma response, and there are behaviors that really, really make me angry, that are very unjust and very, very detached, and lacked basic humanity in how that person understood me, right? So I'm not speaking from a position of like, oh, this has never happened to me, and I'm just intellectually constructing this idea. But it bothers me how knee-jerk and how retaliatory our response is to narcissists. And I've cooked this in the back of my head, and I've cooked this in the back of my head, and I've cooked it and cooked it and cooked it. And I realized that the things that we accuse narcissists of, what's so interesting about it, is the thing that we accuse narcissists of is actually a reflection of our own lack of empathy and understanding. And I'm not saying that you're narcissistic if you don't understand narcissists. But because they can be so hurtful, we abandon a neutral understanding, a neutral, actually accurate understanding of what's going on for that person. So let's identify some of the qualities. Let's say like an overt narcissist, right? An overt narcissist is the more well-known concept, is somebody who's always sort of acting like they know better. You know, any conversation you have with them, they immediately one up you. You're just telling a story with friends about this camping trip you took, and you're like, oh my God, like I thought it was going to take forever. My legs were falling off. It was like one of the longest camping trips. I was humping this pack in, and the pack was like 60 pounds. And the narcissist will be like, oh my God, are you serious? 60 pounds? Well, that's nothing. Like one time I did this thing and I packed 110 and blah, blah. And it was like 5 miles further, you know, and I was at altitude. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like this was blah, blah, blah. Right. So they one up, and they constantly do that. Like every conversation you have with other people or even one-on-one, they're interrupting, they're one-upping, they're always presenting themselves as better, stronger, smarter, faster. Or if it's not as obvious as one-upping, they're always condescending, and it might even be in a gentle, kind way, right? So those kind of people that the moment you share something, yeah, I kind of had a bad day. I guess I was feeling irritable and I feel a little guilty because I was, you know, impatient with my kids. And rather than them going, man, like I've so been there. You're a human, dude. Don't worry about it. It happens to all of us, and yeah, I know you're a good parent, right? Rather than empathizing and being with and recognizing the humanity of the person, they will immediately be like, oh, you need this thing that I watched this video and I haven't done that for a long time. I used to do that, but you know, I haven't done that for a long time because I started using this system, blah, blah, blah. I mean, therapists are in great danger of doing this, right? Because we're in the business of offering solutions often, and we forget to empathize first. Or just empathize and don't offer solutions. Like people don't always need you problem solving. But with a narcissist, they'll just relentlessly, compulsively do that. The second you open your mouth, they're solving your problem, even when you don't have a problem. Even if you're sharing something that isn't sad, or you struggle with this, like, you know, oh my God, like I'm so excited today, whatever, I went to the gym and I beat my personal record and I'm feeling really strong. They'll be like, well, you know what, you need to do this. Like, I bet you could, and they'll immediately set the goalpost for you, right? They can't just stop and go, oh man, I'm excited for you. It would, hey, could I come work out with you? Or like, what's your technique? What worked for you? They won't let you share that you know what you're doing and you enjoyed this, right? So they immediately, sometimes in subtle ways, it can be more subtle than that, right? So they can just always be kind and compassionate with everything with you, and it slowly draws you into being vulnerable with all the time, but they never offer vulnerability, and they would never discuss themselves with you. That might sound like, oh, well, that's maybe they're uncomfortable, blah, blah, blah. But it does place them in this position, in this superior position of always being the person who's in control, who's the healer, who can help you. And it invites you to be a victim and to kind of be a mess. And when you relate to that people over long periods of time, it will slowly guide your nervous system or invite your nervous system to be less stable, because they're inviting you to be less stable because they're only rewarding your instability, right? So this becomes really destructive when a parent does this to their child, when they're constantly saving their child and they're all about how they're, well, I love my child, you know, she struggles with anxiety so much, and they'll just go on, and they'll just make their whole life about what a mess their child is, even though they're not saying it in that insulting way. But that's a narcissistic parent who's positioning themselves as this wonderful parent who has this challenge of caring for their child, and they're presenting this front of being such a loving parent. But a truly loving, connected parent would be very careful about how they talked about their child, because they would know that there are lots of people who are not kind. And there are lots of people who stigmatize mental health. And if their child actually did have a challenge with anxiety, they would know that they should only talk about that very carefully and not very often. And they would also know that they're reinforcing it if they talk about it all the time. But no, that parent is just all about presenting themselves as this wonderful, shiny parent who's carrying this burden of being loving and taking care of this child who has this mental health issue. It's narcissistic, right? That parent's being narcissistic. So narcissists one up. It can be subtle, like that parent who is always caregiving and just talking kindly about the challenges their child has, but you begin to realize that's all they talk about, and they're deeply invested in their child being a mess, and their child is responding by being a mess. It can be someone who's always kind with you and always allows you to share and even tries to elicit sharing from you and your vulnerability, but never shares their vulnerability, never presents as a human being with foibles and struggles. There's narcissism in that. And then the really over obvious narcissism is someone who just one-ups all the time. I don't want to go through the full spectrum, but just to hit the bullet points. People raised by narcissists feel very gaslit and misunderstood because narcissists can be quite cruel to their children, but will present very, very shiny to the community. They'll do these grandiose acts of generosity. They'll be involved. They will counsel and be present to young people in the community, blah, blah, while ignoring, dismissing, and insulting their own children. And so their children grow up being told by the community, oh, your mother's so amazing, or your father's so amazing. He's given so much to this community. And the child's brain is like cracking in half going, am I just a horrible, shitty, needy person? Because I don't feel that way with this parent. Like, I don't get it. Like, I'm a mess. I feel abandoned. I feel sad. I feel lonely. I get depressed. And if they grow up and they get therapy or they begin noticing, what they'll notice is like, oh, my parent is like that with the community and with other people, just not that way with me. So another way of putting it is narcissists are very, very concerned with appearance. They are so concerned with appearance that they will allow great harm to come to their own children, their own family members, their own friends, as long as the overall community perceives them as very functional, very competent, very stable, right? If you're a stable genius, there's the sign. Let's not get political, but that is just a blaring foghorn of a signal of a massive narcissist. If you're a stable genius and everybody else is an idiot or fat or stupid or a criminal, whether those accusations are true or not, that is a overt narcissist. So they're very concerned with appearances. They will often constantly one-up. They always have to be the person who knows. They always know more. The second you ask a question or explore a topic, they're immediately providing answers. Sometimes they don't even have the answers. They're just saying shit straight out of their ass. And if you call them on it, they get very uncomfortable or very offended. So narcissists, they talk about, the rules are different. Narcissists have one set of rules for them, one set of rules for everyone else. Everyone else has to be kind. Everyone else has to be whatever. But the narcissist can be abrasive. The narcissist can one-up you. They can condescend to you, blah, blah, blah. But if you call them on it, instantly they're hurt. They're offended. Why are you being so mean? Like, I can't believe you're treating me this way. So with narcissism, the reason it's so frustrating for people in relationship with narcissists, if you're in a relationship with someone who's just kind of aggressive and kind of a dick, and they're also that way with themselves and all their friends, and that's just who they are, you could take it or leave it, whatever, but it's not as offensive. But narcissists are very, very offensive to us because they'll be abrasive and they'll be condescending and they'll one-up you and they'll criticize you and they'll judge you and they'll lecture you and they'll dismiss you and they'll promise you things. Narcissists are really good at like making these big grandiose offers of like, I'm going to do that. You know what? If you need that, I'm going to get that done for you, blah, blah. And the moment they say it, it stops being a reality and they never come back on it. You could even show up at the location and they wouldn't be there and they'd be like, what? oh no, right? They'll just like fail to meet verbally. You can't trust what they say because they're saying stuff to demonstrate, they're saying stuff to garner goodwill, but they often don't mean it if it puts them out. Or they will do acts of kindness if it's fun for them. And over long periods of time, you'll realize I do actually have fun with this person. Sometimes they're genuinely kind to me, but why do I always get this feeling that they don't really care about me? Or why do I get just really disappointed? And then you'll begin to realize, oh, they're only kind to me when it's something they want to do. They would never be willing to become uncomfortable. They would never be willing to be uncomfortable or to put themselves out to be kind to you or I if it's even inconvenient for them. And if you call them on it and say, hey, like I've done things for you, like I took off work early and I went and picked you up at the airport, and that time that you said you were feeling pretty anxious, like I drove to see you and spent time with you and took time out of my schedule, and I'm happy to do it because I'm your friend. But I've noticed when I ask you for things, you hardly ever do anything unless it's something fun that you already wanted to do. They will get so offended and they will get so angry at you, and they'll flip the script on you and be like, I can't believe you're saying this about me. And they'll rewrite what they did. They'll be like, you know, when we went to Disneyland together, I totally didn't want to do that. And you know that they're lying. You could see that they were having a great time, et cetera, et cetera. And so some of these patterns can be subtle, but essentially the rules that apply to everybody else, the narcissist does not apply to them. Everything is about appearance. Everything's about appearance. And they're always positioning themselves to be better. I'm better than you. I'm smarter than you. I'm more accomplished. Now, the more actually intelligent and subtle that person is, the more subtle that will be, right? The more bald-faced narcissist is just straight to your face going to one-up you, right? You're going to be like, man, I'm so proud. I just graduated with my master. And they'll be like, masters? Like, I did the PhD. Why would you stop at the master's? They'll just insult you right to your face. That's real overt narcissism. But the more subtle and the more intelligence, or if they're not trying to, like some people will do that because they're actually trying to insult you because they're trying to manipulate you. But people who are more subtle and less aware of their own narcissism, the narcissism can be quite subtle and quiet. And so when you talk about it with other people, people are like, well, you might be a bad person. What are you saying? I don't think that's what happened. I don't take that person at all that way. In my own personal work, you know, everyone has some narcissism or whatever, and I was raised by, both my parents were very narcissistic in how they related to me. And so I have narcissism. So I've been working on what I did is I did it in a very, 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 very subtle way. And it was by always being super, super nice and being very diplomatic and never making people uncomfortable. And anybody who knows me will be like, John, you're such a nice guy. How is that narcissism? That's narcissism because I'm a normal human being, and sometimes I hate people, and sometimes I'm irritable, and sometimes I'm in a bad mood, and sometimes people do things that offend me. And instead of just treating them like an equal and like an adult who can handle their shit and going like, I'm having a hard time right now because I'm like really irritated with you, and I don't know whose fault, whatever, but you did X, Y, or Z, and it offended the fuck out of me. Like, I don't like it. Don't do that to me. Instead of doing that, I would accommodate their behavior, not give them feedback, be super kind and forgiving around it. I would even, if they tried to take responsibility, I would even excuse it and explain it away and be like, oh, you're probably right. And you go, oh, what a nice guy. No, that's bullshit. That's bullshit. I was constantly placing myself as the nicest person in the room. And I refused to share my own foibles and the cracks in my armor and my own humanity and my own frustration and my own shitty attitudes and shitty days and stupid beliefs. The arrogance of it. Yeah, of course you don't see it, but it's still narcissism. It's such bullshit. Anyway, it's fun being more human. It's fun allowing your own humanity. Because trust me, nobody's nicer than somebody else. Never trust the nice guys who are constantly nice. They have a raging temper, and I had a raging temper. When I was that person, about once every couple of years, I would have a raging outburst of fiery, white hot anger. It's like, yeah, because you're a normal person and you go around acting like dismissing everything when people are abrasive with you or rub you the wrong way, and then you just suck it up until you lose your temper. That doesn't make you better than anybody else. That just means you need to handle your shit and start setting boundaries, right? So be careful with the guys who are compulsively constantly nice. If you never see anything else from them, I call bullshit. Whatever. Maybe that's just me. Okay. So you have the narcissists. They're all about appearance. It can be very subtle. It can be overt and obvious. And we say these things really critically. It's like, oh, they have two sets of rules. What a shitty person. Like, they entitle themselves to act however they want. They entitle themselves to act like a child. But when other people screw up, they're so critical or condescending or judgmental. Like, what a jerk. What a jackass, right? Nobody likes somebody who acts like that. They're all about appearances. They're so shallow. They don't care about anything. They don't care about their own kids, right? So we say this in a very judgmental way. I'll preface going into my thought about narcissism, starting with Richard Ramirez, I think he was the LA Strangler, who seemed the personification of evil. He would like sneak into women's homes and rape and murder them. Like sometimes like a 75-year-old woman, and sometimes children. And when they finally caught him and brought him into court, there's a famous picture of him looking in his pure malevolence. It just looks evil, like he just revels in what he did. And it's like, with more understanding, you're like, that's a front. That dude was hurt so badly and twisted so badly, and I'm not excusing what he did. But I finally heard a documentary, and they talked about, I think he was raised by his grandfather, and they talked about if he disappointed or irritated his grandfather at all, his grandfather would take him to a local cemetery and tie him to a headstone and leave him overnight. Eileen Wuornos. I wrote a paper on Eileen Wuornos, the subject of the movie Monster. She was the woman who started killing her customers. She was prostituting herself, and one time she got assaulted and she ended up shooting the guy, but then she stole his money, and then it became a thing. But believe me, go back and look at her childhood, and it's like, that doesn't excuse murder. But if you demonize her, you are not paying attention. Because these people who end up in these places, who become full-blown psychopaths and murderers and who play evil, have lived through things that you or I cannot, we have difficulty finding words to describe. And you can think I'm being dismissive or permissive. I'm not. But it's interesting how once the crime gets bad enough, we completely just go, oh, we're not going to talk about what created a person who's so full of rage and hatred towards themselves and towards other people that they would be willing to inflict horrific pain and death and to revel in it. Us demonizing them hurts us because we don't understand. If you want to intercede, if you want to have less of that, you need to understand what creates that. And yes, they're responsible for their behavior, but it also didn't happen in a vacuum. Right? Saddam Hussein didn't happen in a vacuum. Remember the story of, he was raised in a tribe that was particularly violent, that the transition of power only happened with murder. And it was something like by the time he was 14 or 15, he'd murdered his uncle, you know, but this was not weird. They weren't like, oh, you horrible person. It was just like, no, this is how it works. And then he rises through the ranks and becomes, you know, president of Iraq. And, you know, you're surprised that he's executing people right and left and like, no, pay attention. That's not surprising. Should we be horrified? Yes. Should we advocate for the victims and try to stop that? Yes. But be shocked, like, oh my God, how did that happen? No, stop it, knock it off. We have to stop being so infantile about the horrible things that happen around us, because they happen in a context and they happen for reasons. And just because we're horribly disturbed and outraged by what happened doesn't mean that it benefits you to demonize the person and refuse to understand how that person evolved to be the kind of person to do that. Right? So back to narcissism. In understanding some of my own narcissistic tendencies and traits, that I had been aware of my behavior and how it felt and what I intended, blah, 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 and it had never occurred to me that I was being shallow or narcissistic. I was trying as hard as I could to be a good person. You hear that? I was trying so hard that I was just burning through my mental, emotional circuits 24 hours a day, right? Constant PTSD, just constantly in a state of hyperactivation, constant twitchiness. My nervous system was just, felt like I was being electrocuted all the time. Any loud sound was like, bam, like, and I just wanted to beat the shit out of whoever dropped that book, or like, because it hurts, like, and it just gets in there, like someone's doing this thing. And I was trying as hard as I could to be a good person. So I had this realization that when people have really horrific childhoods, there are lots of outcomes. Some people commit suicide. Some people get mentally broken, and they'll have multiple psychotic breaks and then end up in and out of mental health hospitals their entire life and never really be functional. There are some people who become just incompetent, completely overwhelmed. They're just a mess. The only way they navigate society is by being constantly dependent on other people, constantly working the system, working the welfare system, maybe stealing a little bit, being dishonest, like whatever. They just never get to a place that they can contribute anything. They're just kind of, they have, you know, they kind of keep their little place, and maybe they work on and off part-time, whatever, but they're so dysfunctional that they're just constantly a problem. Some people just kill themselves. Some people end up just raging addicts or alcoholics. What creates a narcissist is someone who had a really horrific childhood, a brutal childhood, almost completely devoid of kindness, completely devoid of any adult who loved them or paid attention. And they were insulted by adults around them, by teachers, by parents. There may have been terrible sexual abuse. There may have been physical abuse. They may have been made to suffer physically. They may have had parents who were chaotic and just full of crap. And we don't talk enough about how when parents are inconsistent verbally and mentally, that it twists a child's brain. A child is born with a brain that understands consistency and understands fidelity with language and understands those things and expects it. It's how we internalize reality and learn to relate to reality, is we expect some kind of consistency. When you have parents who are totally chaotic and just act on their own impulses and on their own needs, it twists that child's brain. It rips their brain up, and it rips them up inside. So this person may have experienced all these things, and they could potentially have been a suicide, a severe addict. They could have been totally incompetent weight on society for life. They could have been a murderer. They could have ended up in jail. They could have ended up in all of these surface, incredibly dysfunctional things, where to society, we look at those people and we're like, you know, I'm sorry about what you went through, but oh my God, you were a problem. You are a problem for society. But the person who becomes the narcissist is someone who has enough insight into society. They're paying attention enough, and they have just enough self-discipline and wherewithal to hold themselves together, to pull it together. And their ability to pull themselves together is usually done. Now listen, this is important, because we get so angry at narcissists for not being empathetic. But their ability to pull themselves together has to be done with a complete lack of empathy for self. They have to detach from themselves, and they have to whip themselves forward like a beast of burden that you don't care about. And they do this through sheer willpower and force of discipline, and they do it with significant acts of cruelty towards themselves. If they have a parent who's an alcoholic and their school is 15 miles away, and you know, they have the wisdom and the wherewithal to understand, like, I'm going to be in big trouble, meaning they're not going to succeed in life. They can see that they're going to fail. They will walk through the snow for 15 miles to get themselves to school, and they won't tell anybody because they know it didn't work out for my classmate. They got taken away, or whatever happened, or people didn't understand, or I don't want people feeling sorry for me. Like, they will whip themselves forward into a functional state through cruelty towards themselves and detachment from their own emotional needs. They do not allow themselves an actual sense of warmth and nurturing self-love. They don't do it. They don't do warmth and nurturing self-love towards themselves. They are quite cruel towards themselves. And due to the abuse that they've experienced, they have great feelings of shame. And it's the kind of shame that could make them an addict. It could make them a murderer or a rapist. It could make them commit suicide. It could do all of those things. And on behalf of themselves, and also on behalf of society, they will lock that shit down. They will lock it up. They lock it up. They will not visit it. They will not visit it. And if someone tries to elicit it, they will not allow that to be elicited, because they had to detach and lock it down to survive. They had to. There was no adult doing the job that an adult should do. They were not being loved. They were not being nurtured. They were not having those feelings towards themselves. And they look at society and they see that there are certain things that you do that make you functional and allow people to treat you like an equal and not condescend to you and not stigmatize you because you're the person who has an alcohol problem, or you have a meth problem, or you have a heroin problem, or you're a bad person because you can't keep a job, so you rob from people's houses. They're smart enough. The person who becomes a narcissist is smart enough to see how this works. And so they will detach from their own shame of how they have been treated, and the shame that they feel that no one ever really hugged them or really mirrored to them or was really present and just said, I love you because you're you. I love you. Everything's okay. That never happened. They can just see what appears to be a functional life, and they're not interested and being treated like one of the dysfunctional people, and they don't want to kill themselves, and they don't want to go down that road. So they will lock away the wound. They'll lock away all the vulnerable feelings. They'll lock away the shame. They'll detach from kindness towards self, and they will drive themselves mercilessly to achieve social function. They will hyper-focus on the things that will concretize a safe social position. They will start early. They will try to get good grades. And then they will try to be the top of the class. And they will try to position themselves in the eyes of the teacher as the smartest person in the room. And they'll be sarcastic and belittling and dismissing to other people because they are fighting for this one component of life. If you had the component of like, well, I love myself, I'm just here and I love myself because I remember my grandmother hugging me and my mom hugging me and just letting me be a person and letting me make mistakes and learn, and I'm just a human being and that's okay, right? If you had that or have that, you're not going to be as hyper focused on, I need to get this good job and I need to get the raise, because you have a safe place to go. You have a safe way of being and a safe state to be in. But that person who had that terrible childhood, who's just functional enough and can pull it together enough, is working relentlessly for social position to make sure that they're never in a position where anyone would go, oh, they're one of those people who had a horrible childhood and they fell apart and they're a mess and they're a problem. Right? So you have self-love, you have connection to self, you have a family that loves you even if you screw up, blah, blah, blah. That person doesn't and didn't. They can't go back to their emotions because they had to detach and lock them away and actually be cruel to themselves. And then they had to work tirelessly to create the right job and to have the right appearance of things and to do the right things and to get the husband who makes the most money, the wife who makes the most money, the wife who's the most beautiful, the husband who has social status, like whatever it is, they are marrying their way into social status. They are working their way into social status. They are holding conversations with only one point, which is to solidify their social status, which is to further separate themselves from the horrible suffering that they've locked up. Now, you will see them be cruel. So let's say they work their way into being a CEO. They make $280,000 a year with a great package, retirement package and benefits, and they've gotten married, right? Their wife's beautiful and accomplished. They have kids. And let's say they have a coworker who gets depressed sometimes and kind of struggles. And the coworker comes to them and is like, hey man, like, I've had a rough year. My wife and I are not getting along. And, I feel like my kids are like B students. And to be honest with you, I'm just feeling kind of like I'm failing here and I'm a little depressed. A toxic narcissist, like a full-blown personality disorder narcissist, is going to look at that person and be like, man the fuck up. So try harder, or maybe you're just a loser. Like, stop being a loser. And you could look at that and go, oh my God, there's a personality disorder, complete lack of empathy, actually cruel. This person comes and shares with them and opens this thing up to them, and not only is this person doesn't even try to understand or empathize, insults the guy right to his face. Okay, now me, let's be empathetic to the narcissist. And this is what really hit me is therapists already know, we know the structure of a narcissist. A narcissist is someone who has overwhelming shame, overwhelming emotional pain and wounding, who has locked it away so deep that, and then created this detached social presentation that they maintain at all costs, and they will never revisit the shame. right? But we talk about it as if it's unconscious. But it's often conscious. Think about what you're saying. If you take someone who, at the age of 8, their tribe that lived on the edge of a desert said, "You're a piece of shit, we don't like you," and beat them and said, "Don't ever come back, go out and die in the desert." And that person went out in the desert and wept and cried and then realized, "I'm going to die if I don't do something," and pulled themselves together and walked and fell into a cactus and had to pull the spines out themselves and was close to dying, was in severe pain from dehydration, and actually figured out how to tap a cactus, and then figured out how to, even though a mouse used to be a desert mouse used to be their favorite animal, figured out how to trap them and like rip them apart and eat them, and then figured out how to burn wood and traveled 80 miles across this desert and made it to the other side, and then made it into some kind of paradise in which there's water and they can mate and they can be sort of accepted into a tribe on that other side that's in a tropical jungle that's pretty beautiful and much kinder life. And as long as they obey the rules of that society, they're accepted, right? So there's that person who made it. And then someone from that tribe comes up to that person and goes, "I'm kind of having a rough week. Like, people in the tribe felt kind of cold to me, and it felt like I wasn't being treated well. And in addition, you know, the river where we have to draw water is like a mile away. And to be honest, I'm not feeling it. Like, I'm having a hard time getting myself up to bring the bucket and go to the river and bring water." The person who got kicked out of the tribe on the other side of the desert and almost died multiple times crossing the desert, fell into a cactus, had to learn how to tap, and showed up emaciated and worked their way into this new tribe. What the fuck do you think they're going to say? They're going to be like, "Go fuck yourself, man." Where? Boo fucking who? Take your fucking bucket and go collect the water. Don't whine to me about it. You hear the tone? It's because I was that person. I developed the niceness as a coping mechanism and as a defense against the fact that I didn't want to be that kind of person. I was raised in a culture where that's fairly common, the kind of like, "Oh, boo-hoo, wah." It was very male. Like, all men were raised to be that way. You do not share your own pain or struggle. And when somebody else is struggling, it's just like, oh. You make fun of them. You mock them. You suppress their ability to express what they're experiencing. We're so shocked at the coldness and callousness of the narcissist. But if you saw what the narcissist lived through, and if you saw how hard they had worked, they emotionally, psychologically put themselves through a boot camp that lasts for years to hold themselves together and to squash all the shame and all the emotional wounding so that they can offer society a functioning person, and so that they can be a functioning person. So again, that other accusation of they're so shallow and two-dimensional, they only care about what things appear like, that's accurate, but it lacks empathy on our part. It lacks empathy on our part. We're accusing them of not being empathetic, and it's true, they're not empathetic, but we are coming to them with a complete lack of empathy and understanding that you're coming to that kid that got kicked out at age 8 on the other side of the 80-mile desert and almost died multiple times, had to weep and cry and mourn that no one loved him and was not going to take care of him, and had to get over it and pull himself together and get through the desert and join another tribe on the other side of the desert and survive the whole thing. And then you're a shitty person if this person who has to walk a mile to get water and is kind of depressed this week if they come to him and he's like, go fuck yourself, I don't give a shit, don't whine to me about it, we lack understanding of narcissistic people. It does not mean to be permissive. It does not mean to allow them, when they're toxic narcissists, to destroy their friends and their families and their children, God forbid. It does not mean that they're entitled to destroy their children, and they do. They're often most cruel to their children because their children are a reminder of their own trauma and their own weakness and what they buried in order to be functional. And their message to their child is, go fuck yourself, figure out how to be functional. I don't give a shit. That's the way toxic narcissists, they might not say it in exactly those words, but that's the way toxic narcissists are towards their children. They're brutal. They will destroy their own child, and if their child dies of it, they'll be like, well, wasn't strong enough. And it is because they had just enough wherewithal and just enough insight to see what society requires of them to put together what society considers a functional life. They have no chance at empathy or kindness towards self. They have no chance to actually feel grounded or love or whatever. So what do we think they're going to do? They're going to pour everything into accomplishment. The one facet that they can succeed at. The facet that saved their life, the facet that gets them respect from other people and allows them momentary feelings of being loved. So when we call them shallow, again, we lack empathy and understanding. Yes, it's a cruel and abrasive behavior. Yes, it looks shallow and two-dimensional. It's not. It's a survival coping mechanism that has been tuned up to an absolutely fever pitch. I often use the analogy of a cheetah. The strength and the weakness of a cheetah is its brilliance at speed. Everything, a cheetah, evolutionarily speaking, a cheetah has invested everything in one thing: speed. So the cheetah is very narrow and light and has light bones for speed. The cheetah is long and has great balance and a long tail for great balance. The cheetah has a very small head, right, to make the cheetah lighter and more aerodynamic. The cheetah has this deep, narrow chest for lung capacity. It is built for one thing, speed. That also makes it the weakest of all cats. Lions kill cheetahs. Other animals kill cheetahs because cheetahs have this great weakness, which is they're built for speed, and speed is not built for strength and may not be built for resiliency or longevity or whatever. It has a great weakness in it, but a cheetah is a cheetah. A narcissist is a cheetah. A narcissist is someone who has had the chance at all these other things taken away in their childhood. They're not going to get to feel grounded. They're not going to get to be rewarded as a human being and treated with love and respect just because they are a child and just because they exist as a human. They're not going to get that. They're not going to get a chance to have appropriate challenges that are appropriate for their age level. They're not going to get a chance to be a child. They're not going to get a screw up. They're not going to get to be silly. They're not going to get, they are in a life or death battle from the moment they're born, and they have to figure it out like an animal. They're not going to get a chance at any of those things. But if they have just enough insight to see how society works on the surface of things, you need money. It's better if people respect you. You should be kind and generous with people because then they will really respect you and you'll receive some love and people will be kind and they won't attack you. You'll gain some safety. And that's about it. So the narcissist perfects this one skill, which is effectively navigating and climbing society. But they're doing it to achieve safety and to receive respect and kindness. They're trying to elicit respect and kindness. But because they're doing it in a system in which they've had to achieve these things to elicit it, they come to believe that no one is actually kind or loving. Kindness and love is something you receive when you perform well enough to receive it. You see these things we accuse narcissists of? That they're kind to other people as a performance, and when you're kind to them, they don't actually believe it or trust it. They think you're being manipulative, or they think they earned it by their achievement. So they don't even really feel that wonderful feeling of like, oh my God, this person just loves me. What a wonderful feeling. There doesn't need to be a reason this person just loves me and respects me. No, they're like, I earned that love and respect. I became a top medical researcher at Johns Hopkins, and I designed an artificial heart and blah, blah, blah. Like, of course they love and respect me. But that's not real love and respect, because you built this position, this social position. But like a cheetah, that's the only skill they had a chance to develop. So now they're trapped in their own system where they've been rewarded for the one thing that they could identify, that this is survival. If I do this, I survive. If I do this, I can receive some love and some respect. If I earn my way into that and I overachieve, which is a backhanded way of saying you're two-dimensional and you're shallow. The only thing you care about is social climbing. Yes, but that's insulting when we say that, and that lacks empathy, because that narcissist is doing it because it was the only chance they had to experience love and respect. And then they were smart enough to hold themselves together, to be very cruel to themselves emotionally, and to reject their own emotions and squash all of the drama and the wounds and the fear and the struggle. And they locked it off so that they could function. And so then they went and functioned, and they got better at functioning, and they competed at functioning, and they used their functioning to create high achievement. And when they created high achievement, people were loving and respectful. And they're like, oh, that's how this works. They received no genuine love and respect in childhood. And then they entered society, and there's plenty of crappy people in society who might have mistreated them, especially if they're abrasive and cut off and already narcissistic. They're going to be mistreated. And so they succeeded at the one thing that is concrete, that can be manipulated. And we call them manipulative. Of course they're fucking manipulative. Because their one chance at success is to grab onto the thing that can be manipulated, which is social position and achievement and making more money and having a nicer car and choosing a spouse that's better looking or has better accomplishments and driving their children mercilessly to be top in their sport, regardless of what it does to the child. We're like, well, you're shallow. Yeah, of course they're fucking shallow. That's on their parents, and that's on society, and that's on us. At some point, it's on them to recognize this doesn't work. Something's going on here. What happened for me is I could see that people genuinely loved and respected each other. I could see it. So I knew that it was real. And I had received genuine love and respect from my brothers and sisters when I was a child. So I was lucky that I knew it existed. I knew it was a real thing. But what if you had never experienced it? And then you honed yourself your entire childhood to be a cheetah. And you evolve into a cheetah. You're built like a cheetah. You function like a cheetah. And all of your rewards come from being a cheetah. And then society is like, oh, by the way, cheetahs are crappy, shitty animals, and we don't like them. Screw you. What is a cheetah going to do? It's just going to run faster and be shittier and bite more. Like, what do we think the outcome's going to be? There are lots of narcissistic people, And there are not an insignificant number of just out and out DSM diagnosis, narcissistic personality disorder, just like a raging level of what we call shallow, of what we call focus on social climbing, what we call being focused on appearances, constantly needing to one up, et cetera, et cetera. But we are not going to solve this problem if we don't understand how that person evolved and how they got to be that way. And so my realization was, oh, right? As I've been cooking this for years. I've had friends who are extremely narcissistic. I've been pretty narcissistic at times in my life. I won't further impugn my family of origin, but, what are you going to do? But we do not pay attention. And we're not helping by labeling everything as narcissistic and toxic narcissists, and they're gaslighting me, and, they're shitty people, and, narcissistic abuse. I made one video in which I made an assertion, and I continue to stand on that assertion. I've been abused by narcissists multiple occasions for long periods of time. And I'm saying this owning my own behavior. The only way you can be abused over a long period of time by a narcissist is if you're being narcissistic also. Someone who's not narcissistic and is not all about making themselves a victim and, blah, blah, and they're so mean to me and it says horrible things and why, blah, blah. People who are not like, that's you making it about you. You might be doing, that's covert narcissism, right? Where we're like, I'm wounded, I'm the victim, I'm wounded, I'm the victim, I'm wounded, I'm the victim. That's covert narcissism. You're not saying you're better than other people, but you're making everything about you 24 hours a day, right? You can't be long-term abused by an overt narcissist unless you're a covert narcissist. Now, the exceptions are, for example, women who are financially dependent because it was set up that way that they said, okay, I'll have kids and you pay the bills, and you get a man who's narcissistic and controlling and abusive. People in domestic violence situations who are afraid to leave. They know that they need to leave, but they're afraid to leave. There are cases where, let's say the woman is a covert narcissist and maybe borderline personality disorder, and the man knows it's unhealthy and he wants to leave, but she's so violent and reactive and she threatens to kill herself or threatens to hurt the kids. I mean, you have a very sticky legal situation to navigate there. That man cannot just walk away from that. So I don't mean to be cruel and say that there are no cases where people are not victims. There are cases where people are victims of narcissists or victims of whatever. But what I'm saying is, if you had choices, but you stayed in a relationship and was abused by a narcissist for a long time, it's only because you chose to be a victim, because you have your own narcissistic wound that you never attended to. I don't mean to judge you. I'm one of those people who allowed really poor behavior. I allowed and encouraged really poor behavior and then sat there and was like, woe is me. Why are humans so shitty? Why are people so shitty? And I'm so nice and they're so shitty. That's not the fact. The fact is there are lots of nice people. The fact is I sat there and attached to narcissistic people and allowed them to be shitty to me so that I could go on feeling shitty about myself. And that is its own kind of narcissism. It's making it about you. Why don't you end that relationship, find some healthy people, and contribute to society, rehabilitate yourself, and do something that contributes, right? Again, I'm talking to myself. I'm not talking to you. What society is doing by demonizing narcissists right now contributes nothing. And it is society's narcissism that when we describe it, it's in such a punitive, two-dimensional way. We accuse them of lacking empathy. They do. But us not understanding why they lack empathy is our lack of empathy. We accuse them of being all about appearances. They are. But if we haven't dug underneath the hood and looked at what takes a whole human being and can create them as that cheetah, that narcissist, if we haven't looked at that, then who's the one not being full dimensional? Who's being shallow and two dimensional? It's me, it's us as a society. So I'm putting this out as a call. Yes, there are people who are horribly victimized by toxic narcissists. Most of them are children who have no choices. But yes, you can be in a relationship to a narcissist where you're trapped, financially trapped or afraid because they're so aggressive or so violent or so whatever. Or maybe you were just abused so badly in childhood, you just don't know the difference. I don't blame you for that, but it is your own form of narcissism that you would sit there and lay down in your wound and allow yourself to continue to be wounded, right? So all that's true. I'm not dismissing the damage that personality disorders do. But what I'm saying is society, a little information is dangerous. We get a little bit of psychology jargon and psychological jargon and a little bit of understanding and a few concepts, and suddenly we're in this full-blown social media war, diagnosing everybody else and calling everybody, and the most common accusation is narcissist. She's a narcissist. He's a narcissist. That's narcissistic personality disorder. That's narcissistic abuse, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, maybe. But even when you meet a full-blown personality disorder, toxic narcissist, if you're only retaliatory and judgmental and accusing, then you are also narcissistic, because that person turned into a cheetah for damn good reasons. And when you look at the structure of it, which I outlined, that's what actually happened for that person. Then you begin to go, oh, I am not going to allow them to behave that way with me. I'm not going to let them mistreat other people in front of me. And I'm not being permissive about that behavior, but I sure as hell understand how somebody ended up in that position. And it totally makes sense, because they could have completed suicide. They could have been a raging alcoholic for life. They could have been, someone who refuses to function in society and is a constant drain on everybody else's resources. So they could have ended up in prison. Well, there are so many other outcomes. And that narcissist, someone who became a narcissist, had just enough perspective and wherewithal to struggle and fight their way across the desert, and to crush, to be cruel to their own emotions and the shame they feel and all the softness and the vulnerability that they feel as a human. They crushed it, and they made a promise to themselves, I will never return to this, because if I do, I'm going to die. If I do, I'm never going to be able to navigate. And so they lock it away, they make it across the desert, and they see the next tribe, and they join that tribe, and they learn the rules of that tribe, and they do nothing but focus on the rules of the tribe. How do I ascend to the top of this tribe? Because then I will be safe, and then I will receive some love and some respect, because I'm playing by the rules. Narcissists are rule-oriented as far as how they get into a safe place. But if you go share vulnerability with a narcissist, they're going to fuck you up. And if they're really toxic, they're going to encourage you to be vulnerable, and they're going to use that to manipulate you, because you have become another pawn in their system of either aggrandizing themselves, feeling powerful because they see you as weak, or using you to socially climb, using you to demonstrate their kindness and their generosity, even though if no one's looking, they're mean to you and they're not kind and they're not generous. Right? We as a society are responsible for the fact that this stuff happens. Not personally, it's not your personal responsibility, but it didn't happen in a vacuum. JS wonders. That was my wondering. That was my realization. I've been cooking narcissism for like 2 or 3 years. I've been thinking it through, making choices about friends and friendships and choices about my own behaviors and insights. And it just hit me one day. Their narcissism does not justify us being punitive and narcissistic towards them. Their lack of empathy, if it elicits a lack of empathy in me, it's only because I'm also narcissistic. If they're being two-dimensional and I'm two-dimensional towards them, it's only because I have a capacity to be two-dimensional. And understanding exactly how they became the way they are, and understanding that it is well-intentioned and that they gave everything they had to achieve the skill set that they have, and they sacrifice their own emotions and their own healing to do it in order to integrate with society. And that's why when you come to them and you ask for empathy, they're like, go fuck yourself. Stop being a loser. That's why you get that response, because they sacrificed their own vulnerability. Why would you think that you're going to get to play yours? And that's why the overt narcissist and the vulnerable, wounded person become such a good match. Because a vulnerable, wounded person will narcissistically just keep insisting on displaying their wound to the narcissist. And the narcissist will just keep fucking with them and feel more powerful and be like, I'm strong, I'm good, you're weak, you're shit. They won't say it, even if they're diplomatic like I was, but they're positioning themselves. And so then their victim is a covert narcissist who keeps making it about their wound. Hey, man, if you open up vulnerably to somebody and they're mean to you or detached, then don't fucking do it again. If you do, you're being narcissistic because you're insisting on being a victim, which is a way of making everything about you and making everything about how wounded you are and how unfair this person is. And this person is such an asshole. Whatever they are, move the fuck on, says John as he lectures himself. All right, man. I've got incoming. There's always more to be said. It's a damn good thing that I have incoming because it allows me to sort of end these things at a reasonable point. I've got incoming. Be kind to the narcissists. Appreciate the cheetah and understand that a narcissist is a cheetah. I love you guys. Talk to you next time. Take care.
Just for today, everything's okay, everything's okay.